If you want to learn more about effective management, head over to mattsingers.com and sign up for my free management training.
Welcome to the Mad Singers Management Podcast from madsingers.com, where entrepreneurs and business managers learn and share. If you like the show, don't forget to leave a review.
Hello, and welcome back to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Itai, Sadan. Welcome, Itai.
Thank you, Mads. Perfect, and excited to be here on this podcast with you.
I am super excited to talk to you as well. You're managing a lot of people, and you have lots of great knowledge to share, I'm sure. So, just before we get into it, Itai, there's people around the world who don't yet know who you are, believe it or not. Would you mind giving a little bit of an introduction about your background and how you ended up where you are?
Yeah, let's definitely fix that and make sure they are all familiar with what we do. And my name is Itai Sadan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Duda. Duda is a leading white label website builder for digital marketing agencies and SaaS platforms. And what we do is we've built a really great platform, a site builder, and many people, starting from small businesses to web professionals, web designers, freelancers, are using it on a day-to-day to build websites, digital presence. We have over 1 million paying websites on the platform today that were built by over 17,000 customers worldwide. The company is now 11 years old. We have 200 employees, now around 7 offices, and growing.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure there's a lot that can be learned from all your experience. So I'm excited to dive into it. But just before we sort of get into too much of the management stuff, like you're obviously in the web space, and I'm fairly familiar with that myself. So what's it been like being in the sort of the digital marketing space here during the sort of COVID and coming out of it now, hopefully?
Yeah, cross our fingers, we are. It's been really interesting times. Obviously, COVID has brought a lot of hardship to many small businesses, especially in 2020. And we've seen as consumers have been in quarantine and all that, there's been this shift from face-to-face physical meetings, going shopping, to online purchases and online transactions, online engagement. And we as a company have actually benefited from that, as we are providing solutions for this kind of new world and the way that people now prefer to interact. We've seen, especially last year around Q2 and Q3, a huge spike in demand for websites. A lot of small businesses, local businesses that did not really have a web presence, understood that this was the only way to survive. And even those that did have web presence wanted to improve, modernize, kind of reconstruct or redesign their website, make sure that it's more transactional, more engaging, adding the ability to purchase on their websites if it's goods or services, or just be able to better capture leads and engage their online traffic. So definitely there was a big spike there. We are still seeing very good demand. I think it's not at the same levels that it was in when Corona hit in Q2, Q3 2020. But still, it's still the way to go. And I think also a lot of business owners who've people who are entrepreneurial and open businesses, are more and more new businesses that are opening are of course opening kind of online first, as this is the way to go.
It's obviously a much cheaper way to open a business, right? I mean, you no longer need to start a business by renting a big office space and paying thousands and thousands of dollars every month and so on. With many business types at least, right? So I would say for many businesses, one of the things I've noticed, and that's probably been the last 10 to 15 years, is that just the barrier to entry to building a business is significantly less. which means there's obviously a lot more people doing it. Still a lot of people failing, but reality is people can start a business now with a lot less resources than it used to take, right?
Yes, for sure. And I think you can start small. What we usually like to call in the software space, we call it MVP, like kind of the most viable product. You do something very small, test it out, and then you see if it has any traction. You see if there's customer demand before you start to scale it and invest more money. So I think both in the online and in the physical world, it's a prudent way to start a business before kind of jumping in 100%.
Definitely. So when you're starting and you're getting a business off the ground, the most difficult thing in pretty much every business, I guess, is getting from 0 to 1 million. I mean, I think obviously there's also big challenges when you get above 1 million, but I think for most people, making the first million or getting to a point where you're making 1 million a year at least is the most challenging thing. So what sort of great advice and what sort of experience do you have to share with the audience around that?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think kind of getting to the first million is the most difficult and the most stressful. I feel afterwards it's getting to the first 10 million or 50 million, which we're on that path, and 100 million it presents different problems of scale, problem of managing employees, but the first million is that's where the sleepless nights come in, where you don't know if you're going to be able to make payroll in the next month, and things like that are much more stressful than in my opinion, than some of the challenges later down the road. My opinion in that first phase is a couple of things. Make sure you have a good partner. If you're not starting alone, if having a good partner, this is someone that will be with you for a very long time.
Yep.
My partner and co-founder is someone I know since high school, and by the way, I'm already 45 years old, so we have this very long relationship. We were even college roommates, so a lot of the stress and the challenges that we had in the last 10 or 11 years were shared, and someone to consult with. And I think choosing that partner or co-founder is very, very important.
I would totally agree with that, and I would say, I mean, I've definitely had my fair share of not so good partnerships in business, and I've also had some extremely good ones. And I totally agree with your point. I think what I tend to say now is partnership is at the level of marriage in terms of importance, right? I think many people kind of meet someone online and like 5 minutes later, they're like, hey, let's start a business. And, you don't know them. And again, I'm not saying it couldn't technically go well, but I'm just saying the likelihood is very slim. The same if you start online dating with someone halfway around the world and talk to them for 5 minutes and then plan to get married. Again, there's probably a small tiny percent chance it will go well, but most likely not, right? And that's exactly how I look at business partnerships, because for me, it's one of those things that like even with a great idea, it can totally break it, right? And I mean, I consult with a lot of managers, right? And I see so many people where, a bad business partnership literally just forces the business to the ground, right?
Yeah. Totally, and I think the analogy of a marriage is precisely it. You're going to spend many years and with this individual, or sometimes it's more than one person. And if it goes sour, it's a lot of stress to deal with and a lot of challenges. And these are the things that can actually break you.
Definitely.
I've definitely, consulted other companies, and I've seen it when partnerships go bad, and it's very unfortunate. So take your time and be wise on the choices that you make there. Don't hurry to bring someone that you've not like fully vetted and not had the experience, because kind of when things, a lot of these partnership are measured when things don't go well, when there are challenges, and then you kind of learn how each person in the partnership reacts to that.
Yeah. And actually, again, just like marriage, I think one of the biggest failures people make, even in relatively good, with people they know quite well, is expectations, right? So the one thing most people don't do is they don't sit down and have a bunch of very solid conversations around the expectation, right? Like, what do you want out of this business? What's your long-term vision? Are you looking to make a little bit of money the next year or two? Are you looking to do this for the rest of your life? Or what's your vision? What's your goals? What kind of money do you need right now? I mean, I sometimes see business partnerships start making a little bit of money, and one of the people's like, oh, I'm broke. We need to take out all the money we possibly can. And the other person being like, well, I want to reinvest it all, and so on. So like having a solid conversation about those things up front is so critically important. And I see a lot of people hiding it, or they'll be like, oh no, I don't want to talk about that in case the other person feels the other way. And I'm like, you definitely want to talk about that up front. You
Yes.
don't want to find out that, a year down the road or whatever, right?
Absolutely. So many things to talk about. Make sure very clear definitions of responsibilities. What is each person going to be in charge with, right? So hopefully, a little bit of overlap is good, but if like you're sitting in the same square, that's not going to work well.
Yes, critically
Yeah,
important, and particularly, I mean, I operate a lot in the SEO space, and what I see all the time is people being like, yeah, we just both do a little bit of SEO, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's not gonna fly.
right. I'm in charge of the business side. He's in charge of everything related to the technical side, product side, all the engineers. And, there's 100% trust that the other side is doing their best, is doing a good job. We consult each other, but, we each have very, very clear roles and responsibilities.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to go around it for sure.
Yeah. What else is important? Touched about it a little bit. If it's possible, both you and I talked about it, to start a little bit smaller, test the concept out before going full head into it, in terms of a lot of like expenses, and then it would be great, especially in the online world, right? This is what it allows you. I remember our first days at Duda. Me and my co-founder, we knocked on doors of small businesses and asked them if they needed websites, and heard the responses, put a little bit of money on Google AdWords with a landing page, just to see is there demand out there on the web, right? Initially we used our own product to build websites almost as an agency for kind of to eat our own dog food, right, before you ship a product out, and to make it better. Eventually, we only made the product, we put the product on the web and let people build websites themselves, but that probably took another year and a half after really starting. So the more you can limit your expenses and try out your concept out there, see if there's real demand. And what they call it in the kind of the software world, the product market fit, right? That's a very important group of words that we use to make sure that the product or the feature or the service that you're offering is actually something that customers want, that a customer is willing to pay, take out their wallet and pay for it. And hopefully there's enough customers out there in the world that share a very similar pain point that you're solving.
Definitely. One of my favorite things around this is um, people are so hooked and saying like, oh, there's no businesses out there doing this, so we will be successful. And the way I tend to look at it is exactly the other way around. If there's no business out there, it's either because people are not looking for it, or you have to educate people on what it is, how it works, and all this good stuff, right? Whereas if there is existing businesses doing it, you just have to find a different angle. So either, better pricing, better service, better something. But very often people that aren't into business, they often look for concepts that don't exist instead of business concepts that do exist, and look at how to improve them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest, let's call them mini hack, but it's probably one of the easiest thing. If you want to start off your first business, in 99% of the case, you're going to be much, much better off starting a business that is similar to an existing company, right? Or an existing successful business, because that helps you validate that there's actually people buying this product, right? And it makes it, like, for example, today, if you want to start a website agency, I mean, it's obvious there's people buying websites, right? So
Yes.
it's then about figuring out like how can you differentiate yourself, but that's a lot easier to figure out how you can do that than figuring out if there's an actual demand in the first place.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I agree with you. Probably 99% of the businesses are going to be operating in an existing market, and where there's already competitors, and it's really a matter of differentiation. I think the kind of 1%, which is probably very risky, and if you manage to crack that, it's there's huge upside, is really to form a new kind of a new it's a new product into the market that there's no competitors. There's a few examples of that have been successful. I think a lot of people hope that they're there, but they're actually not there. They're more. But these are examples of, like, when Twitter came out, who knew that a service of where you can type 14 or 16 characters is something that people will want to use, right? So there's I would say these are the 1%, and I don't think everybody should strive to try to do that. It's very, very risky. But if you manage to do that, it would be a big outcome.
One key thing for me on that, though, is that even those people who manage to succeed, it's rarely the business owner's first company. Right. So when you see those companies that does something new and actually succeeds with it, in most cases, that is not the owner's first business launch. All right. Mm-hmm. So often the people who do succeed in those areas is people who have launched companies, who have launched business before, and comes into it with that experience, and often also some money in the back pocket, right? Because reality is, when you're starting out and you're trying to make a living and you're trying to do a bunch of things at the same time, and money are relatively tight. Like, I'm not saying it's not possible, but I'm saying it's definitely a lot harder, right?
Yeah. It's harder. And there is examples, right? Mark Zuckerberg, it was his first business. The Twitter guys, it was their first business. But we're talking about, it's like, and ideas like that, it's not even 1 in 1,000. It's probably, it's kind of 1 in a decade, or a couple in a decade that actually succeed. That Airbnb, right? Like, started with renting out mattresses in people's houses. VCs listened to it and thought that's a joke. Like, who's going to rent rooms in their houses, right? And eventually it became a huge business. But again, these are very, very rare cases.
Definitely. And again, it's from my point of view, it's the same thing, right? Like, you can be lucky, but just again, like, everyone can win the lottery, right? Potentially. But the likelihood of doing it is relatively small. Right. And at least when I'm gambling with my own money, I prefer to increase the odds of winning.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Excellent. Interesting. So you have also been raising capital or raising money to help you grow and scale. So can you tell me a little bit about how you've gone around that and what your experience has been with that?
Yeah, we've raised 100 million over the 11 years of the company in multiple rounds. We just closed our D round in July this year, which was a $50 million raise from growth equity investors. And yeah, I think that's another decision that entrepreneurs need to make. Do I want to stay bootstrapped and kind of grow the business at the pace of the revenues of the top line coming in, or do I think that there is enough here that could interest external investors? I probably cannot talk too much about bootstrap because we've been funded almost since our early days, and I think that's more common in the software sector, and especially in SaaS subscription type of businesses that can have huge scale, and those type of businesses are the businesses that investors are looking to invest in. I can say that initially I didn't know a lot about it, and this is my first real business, so I've kind of learned along the way. Now, as I mentioned, I've done multiple rounds, so I have much more experience around it. It's kind of, once you take money from investors, you have to understand this is another relationship. It's another marriage. So you have the marriage to your partner. Now you have a couple of other relationships that that now there's people that you need to report to about how the business is doing. We have quarterly board meetings, and it's very important to bring the right people on board, because they can make your life really painful if there's misalignment there. So that's a whole nother relationship that you need to manage. And in my case, there's now multiple investors, so it's many relationships that I need to manage. I have to say that so far I feel like I've made the right choices in terms of the investors that I brought on board. They're great. They're very helpful, and it has really helped accelerate the growth of the company. So my company is not profitable, and we're able to invest today in growing sales and growing a marketing team and investing in the R&D, with the goal that eventually, when we will want to, we will be able to bring it to profitability. I think another couple of words on raising money. I think once you kind of go and drink from that well, you end up going back there again and again. There's certain expectation around growth that comes with investment capital, and it's a certain alignment that is between you and your investors and the employees who come on board. Everybody who is part of this ship is there because part of the reason that they're there is because they expect an interesting growth pace. So if suddenly you were to, it's harder to make a decision to say suddenly I want to slow down and I want to be bootstrapped, because then you're kind of breaking some of that alignment that you have with investors and employees around, hey, we're here for growth with a big exit down the road.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think one of the big points for me, so definitely, again, when you're taking money, right, a lot of the time people just look at the figures. And as you said, the most important thing, again, is it's like a partner, but more importantly, you can get a ton of benefit from it as well. I think the biggest benefit from taking money is probably not even the money themselves, but it's the experience you can bring in. It's the network, it's the skills. I mean, because I see most of the people that I see taking money successfully and doing really well with it is not just taking the money, but they're really bringing people on board that can help them catapult the business forward, either through their connections or through their business skills and so on, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people, at least the first time around when they're looking for money, completely overlook.
Absolutely. The value and the experience that you're bringing with these investors is critical. Some of them Hopefully, if you're bringing them on board, they bring that experience that they've seen multiple businesses, and they've seen what drives success and where kind of the failures are. And especially, for me in the early days this was my first business, bringing in an investor that had that experience, they also acted as almost as my mentor. I'm kind of referring here to the person who led the seed and participated in the B rounds and some of the subsequent rounds in Duda. His name is Oren Ziv, a pretty prominent investor in the Silicon Valley. And until today, we have an excellent relationship, and I confide in him in many, many aspects of the business. So yeah, that experience that you're bringing on board in many times is more important than the actual money. Yeah. And sometimes I've made decisions to take actually a lower valuation, but bring in someone that I felt I would have good chemistry with is more important, and someone that can can help advance and the business is more important than the actual amount.
Yeah, totally. Excellent. Yeah, but that's very interesting. So from a management standpoint, I mean, you've grown your company, so you have around 200 staff now or so.
Yeah, 200 people across about 7 offices right now.
Excellent. So you've obviously been part of a lot of growth. What's been the biggest management challenge that you have faced going through that sort of development?
Yeah, there's definitely a different challenges. I think it's part of it is in our case, we have offices in Palo Alto and an R&D team in Tel Aviv and an office in Brazil. And now we acquired a company in Quebec, and we have an office actually 2 offices in the US, one in Colorado and one here in Palo Alto where I am, and a new office in London. So all these time zones and people in different places, and making sure that the communication flows and that people know what is happening and people are aligned with the vision and the strategy, and just getting things, execution across all these time zones is a challenge. I kind of remember, early days when we were all in one room, when we were maybe 10 or 20 people, it wasn't a problem. Like everybody knew everything. And then one day, one of the employees came and said to me, "Itai, there's no transparency." I said, "What are you?" That's like the first time I heard that word. It reminded me, it was a word that I heard in previous big corporations that I was in, but I didn't feel it was a problem that we had in a startup. But it made me realize that we've grown to a certain amount of people where you have to put an effort into communicating and making sure that everybody is aligned. And today with 200 people, we have, I have a CEO newsletter that goes out once a month with updates from the different departments, so everybody knows what every department has to say. Here's a couple of bullet points on the achievements in the last month, and then a couple of bullet points about shout outs to people in the org that have been doing a great job, and then another couple of bullet points about the challenges that they're excited to overcome in the next month. We do quarterly all hands at the end of every quarter, monthly town halls. So there's a lot of effort around communicating and making sure everybody knows kind of what direction the ship is sailing.
Yep. And that's again, like you alluded to it earlier, but basically at sort of different levels, there's different type of challenges, right? So again, you don't have so much of those challenges when you're moving from 0 to 1 million, but if you're starting to move above 1 million and starting to have a significant amount of employees, then obviously those challenges start coming out, and they can be very big, right? Now the benefit at that point is that you're often making a little bit of money, so you can better afford to invest in it and so on, and do some of the right things. But it definitely still takes a ton of effort, right?
Yeah. These things, you don't wait till you have 200 employees and not even 100 employees. I think these problems scale with size. So, the first time that I heard that there's communication or that transparency problem was probably when we hit 20 people.
Yeah.
And so you start to solve it there, and you kind of add on more and more communication processes and as the company grows. Different challenges are around management and people. And that's also at every different stage. As the company grows, you start, at the beginning you're very flat, and everybody kind of, either reports to me or to my partner. At a certain point, you have to build kind of middle management layer that will help you manage the team, and making sure like how to build that right. Do you promote someone who's been doing a good job as an individual contributor to a manager, or do you bring someone external? These are big decisions, and many times we've got it wrong. Like taking someone who's been really good as an individual contributor, and then saying, okay, now you manage 3 or 4 other people. Not necessarily do they have the right skills to be a manager. They might not be good at it. And now you potentially lost someone who was really good at doing their job. You promoted him or her to do something that they are not as good at. So
this is what you're hitting on, one of my key passion points in life here. So one of the things I love about being a management coach is very much exactly what you alluded to here, right? So the problem is many companies have lots of good training and lots of good development around the specialized skills. But the second you'd start talking about management, most companies have very, very little training and support for managers, right? And one of the key things for me, like to that point, I am a firm believer in most businesses promoting from within is by far the best route, right? Obviously, if you're growing at a certain speed, like there might be situations where you have to hire from outside. But my experience is that the risk when you hire from the outside, the risk of failure is significantly higher because you don't know what you're getting. When you're promoting from within, you have a very good idea of what you're getting, right? So there won't always be a super success, but there rarely be a total failure, right? But for me, definitely the number one thing is really around developing people internally from, I mean, I would say from day one, but really consistently developing your staff to be ready for those management positions. Because when you suddenly pull up a staff member and say, hey, you're doing great at the development, you're going to be development manager. Now, if they've never heard about managing people before, if they've never spent any time learning about that, I mean, everything else being equal, if they're great at development, they can learn to be great at management. But there's a difference between being able to learn to be great at management and being great at management. All right.
Yeah.
And that gap, I think the biggest issue most people have is they're not doing the training, they're not doing the development of the staff ongoingly to make sure they're ready to take those steps up, right? And that's fundamentally, that's what I work with so many companies on, because that is such a differentiator. Like if you start working with people, if they have sometimes a year or two or whatever of, working with their manager, upping their management skills. So, the gap when they move into a management role is maybe half or whatever, like that just makes such a huge difference in success, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard, right? You're starting a company, you don't have that many resources. Definitely, you cannot bring a full-time in-house person to be a management consultant. I don't know how much budget you have to bring externals, but this is, if you can, I think that's absolutely the right investment to do in your management.
I think what I see that I find really funny is like if someone gets promoted to be a sales manager, the business owner often buy them courses of trainings on sales, not on management, right? And that's what I see that constantly, right? And often it's because exactly as you say, like the thing is, if you start a business and have no experience in management, like it makes sense, right? You don't know what you're doing, so you don't know what you're heading towards, right? but fundamentally, like the key thing, if you ever promote anyone into a management position, like even if you have very little budget, like go out and buy them 5 books, like go out and do something, invest in them somehow. Because I'll tell you, if you hire someone, if you promote someone into a management position and you do nothing, one, they might learn over time, but it will take them so much longer. And the key thing is that like investing in your front level staff is great, but the returns you get from investing in your managers are just so much higher, right? Because they will influence the business so much more.
Yeah. And I think there's, also try to do it gradually. We've used a lot of times kind of the lead role, which is, it's kind of a step to being a manager.
Yep.
So maybe as a lead, you're kind of more the technical mentor to maybe 2 or 3 people underneath you. And you start to kind of dabble with, being kind of this coach to a group, and you can see how the person is faring on that, and eventually make it more official as a manager. So kind of start to give some responsibilities and see how the person is doing before you give them the full kind of the full title and so forth. So it still gives you an option to, if they're having challenges, anybody who's having a challenges at these first steps, as the responsibilities grow, is just going to find themselves kind of deeper in the hole. So if you see that they're having challenges, I think that's the place to kind of stop and help support them and see if they can actually bridge that gap as a manager. And if not, then this is not the right decision. Bring someone else in place. You can still have that person, because I assume they have a lot of industry and product knowledge. So keep them as kind of this more technical lead, and bring in a manager who actually is good with managing people. Because I think that's many times, as you said, you can take courses on a lot of like how to be good in sales and know the processes, but managing people is hard to teach.
It's some people think so. I've done it for many years, so I find it relatively easy, right? So the biggest thing here, the biggest problem a lot of the time is the fact that the difference between being an individual contributor and being even a lower level manager is much, much bigger than growing from a low level manager to a CEO. Because the mindset change when you're going from being an individual contributor, when it's all about you and what you do, to any kind of leadership or management role where it's all about the team. Right. The thing is, as soon as you manage other people, what you do really doesn't matter. Like you can do a perfect job, but if the team doesn't hit the goal, like it doesn't matter, right? And that mindset change, that's often why people will fail initially in the leadership or management roles, because they don't learn to see that difference. And the key thing is, what happens to most of the people that fail is they start working like crazy, and they're trying to do the job of 3 people. Instead of actually managing those people, they're basically trying to do the job of them, because they're trying to make the department successful, and they keep using the same tools as they were using when they were an individual contributor. So the key thing that I see is that if you have people that are struggling, that's typically because they haven't gotten out of the mindset of being an individual contributor and into the management mindset, right? And that's one of the first things that I spend a lot of time with people on. But my experience is, as soon as they get that, actually moving up within an organization is so much easier, because if you manage 20 people or 50 people, it's not actually that much difference, right?
No, I totally agree with you. I was before starting Duda, growing up in Israel, I also served in the army for 3 years, and as a team or squad lead there, what you need to think about it, think of a unit with rifles shooting forward. Doesn't matter if you're the squad lead and you're a great shooter, that's like 1 rifle shooting in the right direction. You need to make sure that 10 rifles are shooting in the right direction, right? That's
exactly.
That's what's important.
Yeah, And that's exactly the point, right? And that this is, I mean, entrepreneurs have a tendency to do this as well, like particularly technical founders and so on. They tend to stay way too technical and way too ingrained in the details, even as the company grows, right? And often that's a big, they're actually not helping the business, they're holding the business back by doing that. But it comes as a natural in many cases, right?
Great.
Excellent. Well, Itai, that's been a very, very interesting conversation. Very awesome to talk with you. If people are eager to get hold of you, if they want to know more about Duda, like what's the best places to go and so on?
Absolutely. Our website is at Duda, that's duda.co.co. You can find more information there, and you can reach out to me on different social networks, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, Itai, that was very, very fun to talk with you. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Mads. I enjoyed this conversation as well.
Awesome. And to the audience, thank you very much for staying with us all the way to the end. We'll be back again next week.
Thank you for listening to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Please leave a review. It means the world to us. You can also learn more about management at madsingers.com.